Perfect start. Perfect.
Yes, and I have a Adventure Time cup for my water too.
Oh my gosh. How, how precious.
I'm pretty sure Finn and Jake are devotees of Kali. They're stuck in the Mahamaya very much.
Awesome. So welcome to our brand new podcast, Art of Shakti Talks. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
Anyone who doesn't
Great to
know,
be
my
here.
name is Sarah. This is Amar.
Amar, nice
And
meeting you, Sean.
Yeah, good to be with you too, Ahmad. Sarah, thank you. Thanks so much for having me today.
yeah.
Yes.
So just tell us a little bit about yourself, like how we also came to cross paths. I think it may have been like about a year ago.
Yeah, so the way that we crossed paths, I was looking on YouTube for interesting channels with interesting people that were devoted to Kali, and I found your channel, and the Yoga Nidra videos I really, really enjoyed. And I think the first video of yours I found was one with a chant for Kali, a mantra. Yeah. And I think there was a candle meditation or something too. And yeah, so I guess that's how we crossed paths. Um, and to tell you a bit about myself, well, I think a good way of describing myself would be to tell you what I'm doing with myself at the moment. I'm doing an exegesis of the Book of Job, from the Torah and the Old Testament. I'm transcribing a lecture that was given by a Tibetan Lama last year on the Four Noble Truths. He was reading from Tibetan and translating to English. And as far as he knows, it's the first time that's actually been translated in English. So I'm working on a transcription for that. And for my own learning, I'm going through the Vishnu Sahasranama and using that as a basis to continue my studies in Sanskrit. And what else can I tell you about myself? Um, I like fitness and exercise. I like yoga. Um, I like ancient languages, poetry, music. Um, I'm quirky and eccentric, and I like gardening, and I'm a devotee of Kali.
That's
Oh, and
awesome.
I like cats too. We might be visited by cats during this podcast. I have a couple of a couple of fierce creatures roaming around the house.
We have one too, so maybe they'll see each other on the screen and say hi.
Oh, cool. That would be nice.
So tell me more about how you came to this path, because I remember when we initially spoke, we had a lot of similarities, similar to which I touched upon in previous episodes, retaining to sort of having a really difficult childhood, history of like addiction through psychedelics, and then also having a background of zero upbringing with Hindu religion, but yet having later certain point of our lives something ignited, and then there was just this undeniable relationship with these beings that were from something that was not our life conditioning. So that's just a really, interesting, unique thing that I'd love to hear more about from you. How do you think
Yeah,
that came to?
sure, sure.
Yeah.
I'd love to tell you some more about that. So, for a long time in my life, I had trouble remembering much beyond 2 weeks before, whatever I was doing right now. And the one thing that I could remember was this terrible nightmare that I used to have every night where I was abandoned by my family and I went into a tunnel underground and then I was torn into pieces by this monster, a spider monster with like blades for arms. And I would wake up in the night just screaming and soaked in sweat. And almost all the time I was in a state of fight or flight. I was really scared of everyone around me. Um, I was terribly traumatized by the things that happened when I was a little kid. Um, And that dream was kind of the most defining part of my experience for a long time. It was the only thing that I could really remember. As terrifying as it was, it felt like it was the only thing that kept me to reality, or kept me tied to reality. It was the only thing that was constant. And so I paid a lot of attention to my dreams from being, well, for as long as I can remember, literally as long as I can remember. It's not so much now in like the last 5-6 years since I started straightening myself out, but before that, it was almost as though my dreams were the most significant and real part of my life, and a lot of everything else was kind of, it felt weird and disjointed. My experience of life was not really continuous. A lot of the time it was like I was checked out. I was in another world, because I guess I was just so afraid all the time. I couldn't really be here. And I started to work on myself and started keeping a dream journal. And for a couple of years, I recorded every single dream that I had in as much detail as I could. And so some mornings, before I started my day, I would write like 2,000 words just in an hour, just about my dreams. And so I started to get really, really good recall, and they became more and more complex. And I was doing all of this other stuff. Like I started learning transcendental meditation at a Buddhist temple here in the city where I live, doing Vajrayana Buddhism, and particularly for Medicine Buddha by Shadriguru is his name in Sanskrit, or Yao Shifo in Chinese. That was where I had my first vision. I saw Ganesha. I didn't know what he was at the time, but there was a big blue, like lapis lazuli backdrop behind their icon of Medicine Buddha. And I was sitting there meditating one day, and I must have dropped into some sort of a state. And all of a sudden I could see an elephant. Because the blue thing used to ripple a little bit, like in the air conditioning. And so just in the ripple and the movement of this blue sheet, I could see like this elephant. And I tried to like talk to it, to project myself to it, but it was just like nothing. It was just like, it was just watching me. It was checking me out. And then a couple of years later, this is when I had my first really profound experience with any of the deities associated with Hinduism. Well, except for the one with Ganesha, but I didn't recognize that for what it was at the time. So this dream I had, I was staying at a friend's house because I was going through a really rough time, and I couldn't stay where I was living. I had to spend some time away from there, and I had this dream. And I was going through a lot of flashbacks at the time. There was a lot of traumatic memories coming up, and there was all sorts of things going on in my life. It was just really, really difficult in every way. I even had weird things happening with my skin. And I was throwing myself into exercise, like doing really heavy squat routines with like a 24-kilo kettlebell to like try and center myself. And and then I had this dream where I was a little kid, and I was sitting in this lady's lap. And I was writing with my left hand, and she was writing with her right hand on one side of the page, and she was writing in another language, and then I was copying her. And I woke up in the dream, and her hand that was in front of me was blue, and I was like, "What? Her hand's blue?" Because I've lucid dreamed a few times. There's times when I wake up in my dream and I realize that I can. When you wake up in your dream, you can pretty much do anything so long as you can keep concentrating and not accidentally wake up. You can change whatever you want in the dream world. I didn't try that here. I was just so shocked, I guess. Or maybe she helped me wake up. I don't know, whatever the case. I woke up in the dream and I turned around and I looked up, and there was this blue lady, and she smiled, and she had these big sharp teeth. And I was like, "Who are you?" And she said, "I'm Kali." And I was like, what is going on here? And I looked around, and I was like in this temple, and there were all of these other people walking around, and they were wearing robes, and most of the people were blue. And I was like, what is going on here? And she's like, "I'm teaching you Sanskrit. You've got to learn Sanskrit." And I was like, what? I woke up in the morning. And I was like, what the? At the time, I was learning Kabbalah, like I was learning Hebrew, and I was learning
Wow.
about the Sephiroth, which is about 10 different manifestations of God as forces of nature, which help, like, with the magical power of each letter in the Hebrew alphabet to constitute physical reality. And
Wow.
then, so I started reading about Kali. I just went to the Wikipedia page and I was reading all about her. And then I got to this bit where it says that, she's got something to do with language, I think it was. And maybe it was something about the malas or the skulls on her neck, um, being the letters of the Sanskrit alphabet. But whatever the case, I realized that, Kali, or I learned that Kali, one of the ways that Kali is worshipped is as one of as the Mahavidyas, um, great wisdoms. And I was studying wisdom tradition but from the Abrahamic tradition. I'd like come to it through the Bible. And then all of a sudden I found this interesting parallel. It was like a weird symmetry or an inversion between these feminine forces with the Sanskrit alphabet that create this mystical, religion. Well, for me, Hinduism is a really mystical religion because, I practice Tantra. Um, and so for me, it's all about the mysticism and or that. Yeah, it was interesting how I was studying Hebrew and then had this other dream about Kali. And then I read about her being an imparter of wisdom, and it 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 verified those elements of my dream, and it made me think that, I needed to start investigating this more thoroughly. And so I started to undertake kind of an analytical investigation of Kali worship and the Mahavidyas. And I actually started a Master of Theology around that time too at the Australian Catholic University here in Australia. And I learned about, how to do formal exegesis and hermeneutics. And I was reading about Kali, still considered myself a Christian, and I was thinking, wow, this stuff is really powerful. But I was afraid to engage, um, because the image of Kali had always struck fear into my heart. I thought she was a demon. I didn't think she was a god.
Mm.
Could be because she was covered in arms and skulls and associated with all this violent imagery, and it scared me. And even though she was so friendly and motherly, and she was like exactly the motherly force that I needed in my life in that dream,
Mm.
the power of that dream sustained me through what was a really rough time. It was like she came and gave me this big cosmic hug, and I felt so loved and embraced. And I should have just gotten on my knees and started worshiping her straight away. But at the time, I was a
Yeah.
carnivore, and I especially loved eating steak. And I was like, I could never be a Kali worshiper because, even if I could accept her, there's no way I can change my ways. There's no way I could be a vegetarian. But,
Wow.
over time, I kept unpacking my trauma and kept studying theology, and I kind of moved away from Sanskrit for a bit, but I was always wrestling with myself in the back of my mind about this power that Kali seemed to offer me to transform my trauma and heal myself and actually get myself on track. And so I finally engaged. And it was only in September last year, I reached a point where it was becoming too difficult to run my business. At the time, I was running a lawn mowing and gardening business, and I was pretty successful. With that business, but the PTSD made it too hard. I was, it's hard running a complex business like that with lots of different customers and all sorts of different machines that have to be, maintained at different intervals, and there's stuff that's got to be replaced. There's so much stuff that happens with a business, and especially when you've got all of those tools that with the wear and tear and the lubricants you got to buy, and then when I was managing staff and, managing the books and all that. And on top of that, I was having flashbacks and experiencing discontinuity of consciousness, and it made it really hard. And so eventually I was just like, all right, you've got me, Kali. I think that I'm going to accept you into my life. I'm going to figure out the correct way to invite your energies into my life and worship you as best
Mm.
I can. And at the time I was still eating meat. Um, 2 weeks later, I woke up one day and the thought of eating meat just was repulsive to me. I couldn't eat it anymore.
Yeah.
And now I don't even eat eggs, even though I've got 6 chickens in the backyard, and
Oh my God.
they help me manage my backyard and make compost, and they're beautiful animals, and they make wonderful eggs. But now I trade them for other sorts of food. And yeah, and as you mentioned, I did have there's been times in my life when substances have been my god. I was devoted to substance abuse for a long time. But Kali has helped with that, but more especially Tara, as an emanation of the Mahavidyas. Tara, Nila Saraswati, she helped me sort out that aspect of my psyche. But yeah, I hope that's a good answer to your question. I feel
Yeah.
like I should pull up there and let you ask another question, or
So
let you
yes.
talk for a bit.
No, that was really, really informative. It's great information. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
sharing. Um, so when you started engaging in practice, was it completely from things you read online? Because I imagine there was no direct guide. There was no one who was telling you what to do. So was it solely from what you were researching online or reading in books, and you sort of felt an inner guidance towards what practices to be performing that made you develop your own sadhana that you have now?
Pretty much. For the first 9 months of last year, as I went around my business, I was listening to all sorts of things with these earphones. um, I would listen to audiobooks, and podcasts, all sorts of things on YouTube, and as much about Kali as I could find, and about particularly if I could find it using Kali's transformative powers, um, and trans and also I was looking for people who were able to explain Kali and the Dharma from a Western point of view.
Mm,
Because obviously I grew up in an Australian household, eating Australian food and doing Australian things. And it's difficult, I think, for Western people who have been brought up in a Western view, to understand Dharmic thinking. And
yes.
so I've found at first, like now I guess I've kind of graduated, and I can talk to people from India and Sri Lanka, and I can listen to people speaking like Tamil, and it's like I know what they're saying now because I've had enough exposure, and I'm starting to understand that worldview much more. But back then, I had to listen to different people and watch their interviews. And you were one of those people, and I'm also thinking about Reverend Saraswati in California, a guy called Peter Marchand. He's from Belgium, and they're people who were brought up in a Western view, but they've been to India and they've trained over there and studied in temples and stuff like that, and so they're able to explain the information in a way that makes sense. And so
Mm,
I kind of, when I'm learning something at the beginning, I like to saturate myself with as much information as possible. I like to fill my head with as many different points of view from as many different people, or as many different factoids as I can. Pretty broad. Like I like to create a broad pool of knowledge, which I can then whittle down to find the core, the truth, the essence of it. And so I filled myself with as much information about Kali as I could by listening to these books and interviews and stuff. And then I set the intention that I wanted to learn a mantra, because I learned that you're supposed to see a guru and get initiated and get
mhm.
imparted a mantra. And so I learned all of these different mantras, and I read them and I said them aloud and I said them in my head, and I kind of put it out to Kali. I when I'm having a relationship with a deity, I try to imagine them as much as I can, and feel like I'm grasping them, or meeting them in their world, so that I have an affordance on which to build social constructs. So can have a relationship, a social relationship, and having a social relationship with deity makes it so much more engaging and more reciprocal. And so I tried to establish that social relationship with her first, and I was like imagining what she would be like if I spoke to her. In the back of my head, I was imagining that as I listened to these interviews and stuff. And then I would listen to these mantras and then get on my lawnmower or my whippersnipper or whatever, and I'd be listening to music, and I would deliberately try to make myself vague out and tune out and allow a mantra to be communicated to me, and just try to ask Kali to say one. Like it was like I had to hear them first. I had to hear the Sanskrit words. I had to hear people pronouncing them, and I had to read them and see it written. There was like I had to prepare the vessel for the flame before it was able to enter me, Kali being the flame and me being the vessel. But at the preparation was that I had to expose myself to Sanskrit, to the phonemes, to the sounds, to the sentence structure and all that. And then I was mowing one day, and all of a sudden I heard in my mind, it was like whenever I hear Kali, it's like a voice that comes from the back of my head, and it comes like this. And I heard this voice going in her voice, like in a feminine voice, Om Krim Kalake Namaha, just over and over again, Om Krim Kalake Namaha. And all of a sudden I was like, hang on, is that in the music? And I paused, and it kept going, and I couldn't hear the music anymore. I could hear the mower and I could hear the mantra, and I was like, oh, that's it. And then I got really excited, and my body filled with endorphins, and I was like, oh, and I was back in the moment, and then the mantra stopped, and I was like, oh, yeah. But I was so excited for the rest of the day. And so then I wrote it down when I got home. And so that was my first mantra.
Wow.
And that's how that happened. And that led me to make my first mala. I have 6 malas now. I've made a few others. One of my malas is even hanging on Ganesha in the shrine, at the local Hindu temple. I made a mala with blue lotus seeds and blood quartz for Ganesha there, because the priest there asked for one. So that's been a really interesting part of my journey too, has been making malas. And for a while, it's probably been the biggest part of my devotion, is just making malas for myself and for other people and for deities.
Wow.
But I'll try and hold this up to the camera so you can see it. But I've got I've actually
You did the engraving too.
yeah. And so I made the guru bead as well. Oh, it's so interesting, the story about how I got the guru bead. And then in here I've written tantra as well. I haven't engraved it yet, but I've got so many projects that are half finished. And one thing I've learned about malas is that, like, if you're using them and wearing them all the time, it's like they're never finished. They like come apart and bits break, and they sometimes just announce that they want to be remade. It's like one of them sees a new guru bead and it's like, oh, I want that one. They're very much alive. But yeah, so that was that was the first mantra I got. And so this one here, this is for Lakshmi Gayatri mantra. The priest at the local temple, he actually imparted that one to me.
Wow.
I have to make a mala for this one. That's the guru bead. So Virata Mudra. But I need to get something blue, like lapis lazuli or something. That's going to be a medicine Buddha mala. But yeah.
Wow. Well, that's quite a craft. That's really beautiful. Is there anything else you wanted to share? I know we're almost out of time, but
how much time have we got? How much time have we got left?
We can go an extra.
So basically, Sean, I want to ask some question about is that since you know that mantra Om Krim Kalikaya Namaha, and apart from that, you also have certain essence of Ganesha to it, and or you also worship certain part of medicine Buddhism. So I just want to know out of curiosity, like you do all these 3, or just you focus only on one particular tantra or mantra and then you go on with it?
It depends. So it's different every day. So today, after I did like my morning, Bhuta Shuddhi and fed the animals, I sat down to meditate, and I did a mantra for Ganesha. Oh, you actually gave me that mantra, Sarah. I think it was the first time I made a mala, and I said on the group WhatsApp chat, is there a mala, is there a mantra that I should be saying while I make this mala? And you suggested Om Ganapati Namaha. And so I said that mala, that mantra over and over again while I was making this one. And so now if I ever get stuck and I'm making a mala and I don't know what to do, I don't know how to make the beads or whatever, you know, because sometimes I get orders for them or I get instructed to make one and I'm not sure how. And if I ever get stuck, I sit down and I do a mala for Ganapati with that mantra that you gave me. And then he tells me what to do. And so I did that this morning because I wanted to do a special sadhana this morning so that I could bring my best self to this interview, to your podcast episode. And so I thought, well, a really good way to start the day would be with Ganesha. I don't always have time to start the day with Ganesha. Like I have this tantric tritak practice that I do every day. I have to do that one every day. I don't always do Ganesha, but I try. So anyway, today I did Ganesha, and then I did goodness, which one did I do next? Oh yeah, then I did Tritak. So gazing into the flame of the ghee lamp, and I have these seed syllables that I focus on, different ones with the in breath, and then when I hold my breath and then breathe out, and I visualize the seed syllable in my mind, and I say it inside, so that my subtle body can hear the sound of the beach syllable. And then when I finish, you know, this, and for me, this is one of the best parts of my day is when my tears come, you know, my eyes tear up and I close my eyes and I look up to my third eye, and then I can see the flame of the lamp on my third eye. And, you know, you look right up and then I can feel the Kundalini rising in my spine. And I can see that flame and I can feel it empowering my third eye. And then I concentrate with all of my might and I visualize the seed syllable, and I keep in my mind, like in the whiteboard in my mind, actually, it's a blackboard. I see myself with a flame writing cream over and over again and trying to put that over the top of the flame. And because I can feel the energy rising on I can feel it now, but, you know, rising, it's like the best feeling that I have all day. And it's such a good way to start the day. It's like starting the day with, it's comparable to like having a line of you know, powdered like I used to, but you don't get the horrible come down, and you know, it's bringing me closer to God every day. But anyway, so there's that tantric ritual, and then after that, I did a mantra for Dakshina Kali, a longer mantra, which I do with this same mala here, but it's a longer mantra. I won't say it aloud. I think it wouldn't be right for that mantra to say it. But it's you know, it's a very powerful mantra, that one for Dakshina Kali. And whenever I do that one, like when I do with the Ganesha mantra, I do it with my eyes closed and I think about Ganesha and I hold an image of Ganesha in my head and I just try to invite him into my, you know, mind's eye. And like this morning, it was really cool. He was playing in the water and like he usually just sits there and looks at me, but this morning with his trunk, he was grabbing water and he was like playing in the water and wiggling. And then when I did my japa for Dakshina Kali, I see her in my heart, and it's like in my heart I can see this land with this beautiful grass and these hills and rolling meadows and forests in the background. And there's Kali, and she's like running and jumping like she's a really beautiful young athletic woman. She looks like she's running from battle to battle, like looks like she's having the best time, big smile on her face, and like sometimes she stops and dances. But yeah, so like at first I used to have to try really hard to hold the image of these deities in my head or in my heart or whatever. But now it's like they're just there and I just have to learn to direct my attention to them. And then I see them playing, or, you know, it's cool.
Yeah.
It's like they were already there. They're already there inside of us. You know, it's like they say in the sutras, there's a Shakti in every cell in our body. And you just have to prime your vessel properly to be able to see them. But yeah, so does that answer the question? That's what it's different every day. That's how it was today.
Wow.
That's nice.
That was one of the things that really stood out to me. And then after this, I'll follow up with another question. Was how so when you start developing like a relationship with these deities, how it grows and becomes more and more vivid, more and more powerful in our mind's eye, and then they begin to even be interactive with us and like start to overlap with us into like physical life, like the stronger that that connection
Yeah,
gets.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it's something that really stood out to me was how you're actually able to, because I'll admit this is beyond like my level of connection at this point in time. You how you have like a direct dialogue. Like for me, I'll have like intuition or insights, and I'll realize it's from a higher thing. But to have like an actual back and forth like dialogue and like voice in my head, that's
mm,
like that's very it's very intense and like a strong connection, and it's really direct, and I can imagine there's a lot of incredible things that could come out of that. But one of the
mm.
questions I wanted to ask was, so what would your response be, I guess, to people who say that these are like practices that you need a guru for like proper initiation, and because they're so powerful, because they can have dangers, and have you ever faced any dangers or any challenges?
Yeah, I have.
Mm.
If I could do it again, I would much rather have had a guru because it's been incredibly scary. Um,
Yeah.
but I kind of had to be my own guru. You see, I had to be my own guru to heal from the trauma that I experienced. Um, because met I've not met many people who have experienced anything like it, and I think most people don't believe, when they hear about that sort of stuff. Um, just to give you a broad outline of what I'm talking about is like when I was a very young child, I spent time living with this family. I used to think that they were related to me, that they were my grandparents, but now I'm not even sure if I was actually related to them. They could have been a foster family or something, but they were these old people. They told me that they were my mother's parents, but I think that they mightn't have even been her parents. They might have tricked her. I think they might have even kidnapped her. And like, I'm not even sure if the name that I was given is my real name or my date of birth is real or anything like that. I think I was trafficked when I was a kid. And I was involved in these rituals that no one should ever be involved in, that should not be performed ever. Like really, really bad things, like words that are so traumatic that I don't even want to say them. And so that really messed me up. Um, that's why I used to have nightmares about being chopped apart by spider monsters underground. That nightmare was a condensation of what I experienced. Like one thing I could tell you is that I believe that there were times when I spent like 2 or 3 days underground, without seeing the sun. Um, and all the time I was hearing chanting, all sorts of different languages. Those people were just interested in power, raw power. They didn't ascribe to any religion. Um, the guy who said he was my grandfather, he pretended to be Anglican, and the lady who said she was my grandmother pretended to be Catholic. And she did go to mass every Sunday, but that was as far as her Catholicism went. Like when they were underground, they would get, shrines and icons and things from all over the world, from whatever religion they wanted, just to get as much power as they could. They were those people were pure evil. And and that was why I was so traumatized and why I had problems with substance abuse. And it led me to, sort myself out with cognitive behavioral therapy at first. And then
Mhm.
I discovered transcendental meditation and, Vajrayana Buddhism. And I stopped going to that temple after a while, and I stopped doing the meditation because it was opening stuff up inside of me. Doing transcendental meditation when you've experienced severe trauma can be really dangerous.
Mm.
I just want to take you for a quick walk and show you something to show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to show you a painting that I drew 5 years ago when I first started to open up my subconscious. This is something that I met. That was the guy who was living in my subconscious. That's basically a manifestation of my shadow, I would say. Um, and that was one of the voices that I used to hear in my head, and it was trying to push me away from learning about these traumatic memories because I guess it wanted to be scary and stop me from engaging because I
Mm,
wasn't ready to remember what I had experienced yet.
yeah.
But I found this thing living in my head when I was meditating. I was like, what the hell is that? This needs further investigation. And so I started going out into the wilderness, hiking like in the rainforest, going to the top of tall mountains to waterfalls and stuff like that, just so that I could be alone and meditate. Because I thought if I, encounter something dangerous in my psyche and I chimp out, I don't want to like hurt someone. So I deliberately isolated myself to go into these traumatic memories and to have my flashbacks.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, that's kind of what I was doing when I had that dream. So it was like I was already in dangerous waters. I was out swimming with the
Mm,
sharks,
yeah.
like intentionally. And it's like she was a lifeguard. She came to me as a lifeguard. And then, oh, it was so funny, like, because I'll talk a little bit about psychedelics now and a funny experience I had with Kali one night. I had this one memory that I had only seen the edges of, and it was like it made me think totally different about myself. Because I did when I was a little kid, I did something terribly to another kid, and I injured him for the rest of his life. And I couldn't accept that about myself. I refused to believe it. And because I had this image in my life, in my head all my life, that I was a good guy and I could never possibly hurt anyone. And so as I encountered my shadow, that, thing that I showed you the picture of, and I realized why the shadow was there. Like when I first met him, I was like looking at the picture of him in my mind, and he was just bleeding out of his mouth and he was drawing in the ground with his blood. And I was like, dude, what is wrong with you? Like, what's going on? And and he told me he had cut his tongue out. And I was like, why did you cut your tongue out? And he said, so I can't speak. And he didn't want to be able to speak to me to tell me what he held inside of him. And so I took this LSD to try and see the traumatic memory. Like I was in the rainforest, on my own, um, actually trying to make contact with these spirits that I found in the rainforest. They're wajinas, like the Aboriginal people, they call them wajinas. They're like water spirits. They're associated with the rain and water courses and stuff like that. And so I've met some that live at a waterfall near here, and also further up in the tablelands in the really ancient rainforest. Like the rainforests
Mm,
where I go, for my vision quests or whatever you want to call them, they reckon that they're older than the dinosaurs. That those rainforests have been there for like 600 million years or something. So it's incredibly ancient, powerful forces. And so what I recognize now is one of the beings, or the mother of them all, is Kali. And so I would hear her voice out there. I didn't recognize what it was, but she was laughing one day I got there before I took the acid, and she was like, yeah, you're going to find out tonight. I'm going to show you that memory. Tonight you're going to go to that bridge. There's this beautiful bridge where you can sit, on a full moon, and see this beautiful creek, this big open creek just illuminated by the moon. And it's so bright, it's like watching a movie. Even though it's like in the middle of the night, and you go under the canopy and it's pitch black because the moon doesn't penetrate. But here where it's open, it's amazing. And so I was sitting there, and Carly's like, well, I didn't know it was her, but the voice in my head said, you're going to meet the most terrifying creature around here, like the most terrifying creature within 50 kilometers. And I was like, what the, oh my God, I'm so scared. And she was laughing, laughing, laughing. And then I got there and I was sitting there, and she gave me the vision. I was like, see, it's you. You're the most terrifying creature. I was like, what the hell? She just laughed so much. She was laughing and laughing and laughing. And I was traumatized, and I was like crying, and she's just laughing at me. Like, what the, like, why is this so funny? But and I
I
was
think
tripping. I was seeing so much in the water and in the trees. It was amazing, and I didn't know what it was at the time. But now I see it was Carly, and she was. I don't recommend this to anyone else. You should don't do this at home, kids. Like when the things that I had in my mind that I unlocked on my own, it was like I had to be my own therapist. I studied
mm,
psychedelic therapy too. I've read about psychedelic therapy. I had to be my own therapist, my own patient, my own guru, my own shashi.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't really be that way. But because of the bizarre circumstances and the horrible things that were done to me when I was a kid, it had to be that way. There was no other choice. And
Yeah.
so Kali is my guru. It's a really difficult path to walk, and there's been times when I didn't think I was going to make it, and like it wasn't worth it. But now that
Yeah.
I'm here, I can see that it was. But I hope that I can be a guru for someone else, and that I can give people mantras, and that they don't have to do it on their own, because it is really dangerous. Like I used to
Mm-hmm.
think it was unfair how mantras were kept away like that, like the gatekeeping. I didn't understand it. But
Mm-hmm.
now I feel like some mantras are so powerful that they need to be locked away. It's
Yeah.
like a gun in a gun closet. If you have here in Australia, I don't know what it's like in other countries, but if you want to have a rifle, you've got to have a special safe to put it in, and the police come and check to make sure that it's safe. And
Mm.
you're treating a gun with respect. And it's like a deity is in an inner shrine. It's like that's the gun safe, because if the deity is not treated with the appropriate respect, it could damage something.
Yeah.
And if you are using a gun, you have to make sure that you're always pointing it in the right direction, even if it's not loaded. You treat it like it's loaded all the time.
Mm.
And it's the same thing with a lot of mantras. I'm not saying all mantras are like that. Some mantras are like a pen, but a pen can still be a powerful weapon in the right hands.
Yes. Something that stood out to me that you shared that I definitely resonate with is like having Kali as a guru. Um and I think that whatever karmas we have to get to this point and find the path, I think the greatest benefit to it, despite all the challenge and struggle, is that now we have sort of this perspective of coming from just a regular, ordinary, like Western societal conditioned life, and having these experiences to completely shake our entire belief system, and now having the ability to then sort of transfer that knowledge and that background experience onto others. And
Mm.
one other thing that stood out to me, I think it may have slipped my mind, but specifically, I think it was, yes, I remember now, perfect. Specifically, how I think when Kali comes to us in that specific form of divine, it's really through us already being in an incredibly dark, desperate place that otherwise we would basically drown. And so then for that sort of divine dark energy to come and completely transform our life, it is incredibly powerful, and it's incredibly frightening. It ultimately, I think it really only comes to people when they're in those extreme desperate points, because it
Mm.
just
Yeah.
similar to you. I had, it was directly right after I had a very severe trauma, and I spent a period of isolation that I started practicing so much. I didn't know what else to do, where else to turn. I was like very, I wasn't suicidal. I was before, but at that point it was like I was completely just otherwise wouldn't have known at all what to do. And even, and like all of the, like the challenges that came along with it ended up being completely fruitful and completely worth it. And it builds this like resilience of like the inner witness, like these severe traumas, like that we are just an observer of consciousness through all these experiences, and the soul is never actually touched, and all of these things that we're doing is just
Mm.
to purify and come closer to our higher source and our higher self. So I
Yeah.
just, to really like be aware of like sort of like the dynamics of trauma and it unfolding from our psyches when it comes to like a bhakti practice, is it's like a very like very specific experience, and it's just beautiful to see the someone else has benefited from it so much. And yeah,
Yeah,
it's just
that was what I felt reading your bio on your website too, Sarah. Because before we, made contact for the first time, I read everything I could see about you on your website, and I was like, oh wow, Sarah's got an experience that really, really resonates, with what I feel. And it was like you were already doing what I hoped for. And so it was like you were kind of a role model. You showed me the way, and you're part of the reason that I had the faith to embrace my relationship with Kali. So thanks for that, Sarah.
Oh, makes me so grateful to hear. Do you have any last thoughts before we close out?
No.
Um, I I don't know. I don't know. I feel compelled to say something about the breath. I don't know. Breath is so important. Um, you know, everything is inhabited with the voice of God if we just listen. Sometimes you've got to stop and listen to your breath first. I guess it's probably Tara talking to me. I keep looking over there because I have an icon of Tara sitting just to the left of my computer. Tara speaks to me as Neela Saraswati. She's one of the expressions of Saraswati in the Mahavidyas. Saraswati is also found in Matangi, but one of the things that I really like about yoga and about Kriya, especially Kriya, is the way that it allows you to connect your breath to everything that you do throughout the day. And it enables you to bring a mindfulness and presence into every moment. And when I was healing from trauma, and if I'm, I think that I'm going to have substance abuse issues my whole life. I don't think that's ever going to go away. My body has been transformed. The vessel has been transformed in a certain way. So, like, get this, it's 10 years since I had any crystal meth. But yesterday, all day, I was having cravings for crystal meth.
Wow.
And in moments like that, if I feel overwhelmed by some stimulus from the past, or if I'm overwhelmed by thinking about something in the future that might happen, something that has happened or something that might happen, these things are just projections of our unconsciousness onto the illusion of Mahamaya. And there's already enough illusion in Mahamaya without us doing that. So we can always just bring ourselves into the now with the power of the breath. And if we stop and listen to the breath, and particularly to those moments in between the breath, then that's when we can hear the voice of Kali. And yeah, okay, that's what I wanted to say. That's what Tara wanted me to say to finish.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And I would just challenge that thought that you said about it being lifelong and not being able to overcome, because similar to how you started the interview, you mentioned how you never could have imagined yourself, not eating meat or sort of following a lot of like the lifestyle transformations that comes along with these practices, and you've embodied that. So I would definitely challenge that. I think it is possible, and I think once we start to really dive deeply into the psychological unlocking and like the yogic technologies and practices to have the same sensations and similar experiences that drugs give us, I think it's very possible to transcend beyond the craving of it.
Oh yeah.
It's not easy at all, but it is
You've just got to
possible.
keep making that decision. You've got to keep making
Yeah.
that decision at the moment
Yeah.
to listen to the voice of God and not the voice of the pleasure body.
But there's so much pleasure in God, though, especially through like the practice of Tantra and Kriya.
Yeah.
So that's
But I mean,
it's just a different direction.
When I say the pleasure body, I just mean, seeking short-term gratification through things that
Yeah,
are just going to gratify the senses. Because that sort of pleasure is not lasting, and it ultimately leads to suffering. And the greatest pleasure is found by listening to the voice of God, feeling that the Kundalini running up your spine, and that feeling that I love the feeling that I get when I do a Kriya practice at the end and I'm in Shavasana, and it feels like I merge into the underlying substructure of the universe, and all of the me and I am me, mine is just gone. And it's just like, yes, I am Shiva. It's just such a good feeling. And yeah, so I think so long as you have a practice like that, it means that even if you do have to struggle with substance abuse, thoughts or something like that,
Mhm.
it's easy to say no because you've got the practice, you've got the sadhana. And the great thing about the sadhana is, the things that Devi has taught me is that no matter where I go, I will always have that connection now. Because even if I lose my malas, or even if I don't have a lamp to gaze into in the morning, I will always have that connection in my heart and my mind. I always have those things that I can look to within that I can focus on. And so I always have the resources that I need to make the right decision now. Forever. That's with me forever now. So
Yeah.
you're right. Yeah.
Love it. I love it. I think that's a great note to close this episode. Thank you so much for joining us, Sean. It was really such a pleasure, and we hope to have you back with us soon. And I
Yes, I
also
hope
wanted
so. Thank
to,
you.
as a thank you, give you an free, unlimited, lifelong membership with us on our
Oh,
website,
wow.
so you can
Thank you
practice
so
with
much.
us anytime. I know the time zone is different to join us live, but I'm sure we'll be adding more classes weekly when our schedules open up, and in the site will
Cool.
continue growing. We'll get new members as we continue marketing and reaching new audiences. So we're
That's
just so
wonderful.
grateful to have you in the community with us, and I'll get
Yeah,
you
I'm
the
so
details
grateful to be a part of it and to be
yeah.
on one of your first episodes. It's so cool.
Woo!
And thank you so much for that membership. I'm wrapped. It's wonderful. What a lovely way to start the week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we
Thank
will
you.
talk to you soon. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. What time is it there right now?
It is 8:03 in the morning. 8:03 Monday
Nice.
morning.
It's
So I can hear
6:03 in the
cars
evening.
everyone's starting to go to work, starting their work week.
Nice.
I can hear the cars out on the main road, everyone's off to work. And I guess where you are, everyone's winding down, getting ready to go to bed soon, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
What time is it there?
6:03 in the evening.
Oh,
Yeah.
not quite that time, but yeah, still.
No
Yeah.
worries. Awesome.
Yeah, well,
Well,
enjoy the rest of your day and yeah, talk to you again soon. Jai
awesome.
Ma.
You too. Take care. Bye bye.
Thank you
Namaste.
so much. Bye bye. Namaste.
Namaste.